is do a small circle around the inlet filter, and I'm going to copy this guy, and we're going to change this text to read inlet filter, comma, tip, or typical installation. And maybe I'll move that leader a little bit closer over here. I'm just going to take that circle and put it on every inlet that we are proposing, right, or any place that soil could get into the storm sewer system. And it should be, this is a manufactured treatment device. It'd be a manhole cover on that. I don't have the right style. What I was telling you guys is you don't really need to have the perfect part, because if you go into the properties or the structure properties, one or the other, you can usually change, and you can do this in the source drawing. You can change the diameters if you need, or the length and width, but I can just change the style here. And I can make this look like a storm manufactured treatment device round. It has a description of MTD, hit OK. And there we go. All right, so with that, this is all the information I need to show on my plan. I would go to my tabs down on the bottom, right click, and I would import from template, and I think I have one set up in the first SCD sheet. So I told you you can import your page layouts from your subdivision. It already has a title block. You'll need to change the title, and the page number, of course, stuff like that. You'll need to maybe turn on and or freeze or thaw a few layers, but if you have it set up, I mean, it comes in perfectly zoomed to your site. So we talked about this. There's information missing here, and number one is my existing contours would need to show. And I don't like this. That's in my X reference. And that's a bad style. There we go. That's a better one. Existing contours, proposed contours, inlet filters. Wow. And because I imported this sheet that was previously set up, it has my scale set. It has my orientation set. And I'm really just ready to go in here. And, you know, there's a couple of, on my soil erosion sheet I probably don't need. My meets and bounds, but I do have to add my road names and my lot numbers. They are there. I need to change their color because they're gray. So I would go into my layer manager. I would look at that's probably in the key map. And I look at this road name, parcel name. They are gray. Block name. Let's make them color red. Now they're printing a little darker. Right, and they've even got my street name. All right, I would need to bring in my proposed road name here. But basically, my erosion and control plan is pretty much set. My north arrow came along for the ride. My scale is down here. You can use a bar scale too. But Was that good for the soil erosion? Look at this. Oh, if you're lucky and you find this in one of your drawings, this is a nice little bar scale to have. A lot of stuff that ships with Autodesk and the old world stuff, it's one block per scale. And this one here, you can choose whatever scale you want, and it auto-populates. Okay. So that was that. Now, we've got to go through residential grading again. And if you notice, I'm closing that drawing, but over on the right-hand side, you notice my viewport should have been pulled back a little bit so it prints correctly. It was outside my border. Not a big deal. I will do that next time I open up that file. All right, so into my residential, my engineering folder, I have all my different engineering calculations and/or designs, residential grading being one of them, or tasks if you want to put it that way. And we started some grading. Had a few lots done. You guys should have your 2D file with your buildings and your driveways in there. I told you to insert that as a block so you get the polylines. These feature lines yet, or are they just still? It's good. All right, and you guys would have these copied throughout your project. Mine is not complete, but you guys would obviously have these on each lot within inside the set. And I told you that you want to, make sure your driveway is connecting to the top of curb and not the right-of-way line, right? The right-of-way is the property. We got to connect the driveway to the road. And I told you guys you need 3 polylines for your building. The one you drew originally, that is that perfect dimension I gave you, that is the outside foundation where the dirt hits the foundation of your building. Offset that 0.05 units. You can't see anything again. Are you kidding me? What is with this?
I think the problem is when it's in quick properties, when you open up quick properties, it just goes to that and blanks out everything else. So I think maybe if you turn the quick properties off, it'd be fine.
How's that?
Yeah, now we can see both.
Yeah, all right. So my quick properties are just turning it off. Oh my goodness. All right. So this is the building, right? And did you guys get everything up to that 3 polylines? Someone answer? All right. So each building is 3 polylines. This is the outer polyline. It's the one you drew, and it represents the grade line. This is where the dirt hits the building. Offset that 0.05 units. This is going to be your basement floor. Offset that 0.05 units, and that is going to be your first floor. The basement floor is going to model the hole you got to cut to get the basement in. And the first floor is really just going to be used to help you get labels. But each of my buildings has those 3 polylines. And of course the polyline for the driveway. I told you, just like in our intersection work, you want to make sure that you add vertices at every intersection of polylines. So my driveway hits this top of curb, this driveway hits this top of curb, this driveway hits this top of curb. On top of that, on each of my buildings, the grade line and the driveway intersect right here. So I also need to add a vertex there, and I strongly recommend you guys cycle your drawing aids on and off on an as-need basis. It's better for AutoCAD because it does less work, and it prevents mistakes when you accidentally snap perpendicular or nearest instead of endpoint. All right, so I would do that on each of these grade lines. And if I had you guys, do very detailed models that had sidewalks and steps, and all that other stuff, and, crescendos and terraces off the back, you would be doing the same at every intersecting polyline. So we have 2 polylines intersecting, I add a vertex. We have 2 polylines intersecting, I add a vertex. These 2 over here are lined up, the vertex is already. That's your starting point, right? And you want to do that all as 2D polylines because it's a lot easier to do than doing it when it's feature lines. Here's another little trick too. If these are all polylines that are beginning at elevation 0, and let's start with that. Ooh, where'd they go? Wow. Undo. If you ever change elevation on a AutoCAD object, it's probably because it came from MicroStation. And a little trick is if you change them to 3D polylines, and then, change them to 3D polylines and then back to 2D, those elevations and everything may just hold in. I just want to make sure that I don't have any issues with these guys. Now we're going to change them back to 2D. Then I'm going to adjust those elevations again and see if they stay put where they should. Because they shouldn't have moved when I changed the elevations. All right, that should have been the result. All right. So I'm going to set these guys to elevation 0, 2. So if by chance you work with any MicroStation information, that might be a little useful tip for you, especially if you have a problem flattening MicroStation geometry. All right. Little trick. I believe I have these all on their own layer. If I right-click and select similar, I have the 3 of them selected, or all of these guys actually. And what I can do is move them all down 8 feet using the move command. I type M. It's asking me for a base point. I can click anywhere on screen, it doesn't matter. And it asks me for a second point. I just type at 0, 0, -8. That's going to move all of those basements 8 feet below the grade line. Now, if I select all of the first floors, edit, select similar, and move them all up 2 feet using the same relative command. The displacement, I click anywhere on screen, it doesn't matter. I just type at 0, 0, 2. I just made that relationship that I told you about, where if I use my distance command from this endpoint to this endpoint, you see we have our 10 foot from first floor to basement floor. It's getting that O2 because of that offset we have, horizontal offset between the two elevations. And my grade line is 2 feet below. What that means is when I figure out what elevation I want these all at, I can move them all up relative together. Let's look at that. I'm going to turn on my EGFG surface. I'm going to select it and thaw that layer. And that's a little bit too bright of a color. So let's go back to our color 8. Because that's the existing conditions, right? Note this surface again. This surface is, you're only going to have it print on one plan, your residential grading plan, and it will show up grayscale as existing conditions. And as you see, it is the combination of the existing contours and the proposed contours. All right. So I said we want our first floors 2 feet above the high point of the road. This is my high point. I'm going to assume it's 1/2 of the interval, so 377. 2 feet above is going to be 379. So move all of this. And I can even take these guys too. From here, let's go move at 0, 0, 379. Why didn't they all go? Undo. Hold on, I got something funky going on because I'm not selecting those things. John, close that. And let me try one more trick. Good luck, and let's see if we can select that driveway polyline. Yes, all right. So now let's try that move command again. Notice I was watching in my 3D view, and I noticed that only 2 of the polylines moved. So I undid that all because they weren't all selected. I go at 0, 0, 379, and they all came up to the elevation I want them at, or at least begin at. All right, so I could do the same down here and prepare these polylines. 376, 376, 377. I probably want these guys up at that same 379 to start with. I'm going to move them all again. Oh, actually, I don't want to, yeah, I got to use the move command. From here, and let's go at 0, 0, 379. And it moves them all up. And we're over here, 378, 380. This is like my low point, maybe 379. So I'm going to move these guys up to like 381. So I type move. It asks me for a start point. I click anywhere on screen. my second point. Note that if I use my tab, yeah, it's not working. All right, so I type at 0,0,380, and I move those guys all up an elevation. So now I have these polylines basically all set for my buildings and my driveways. Yes, my driveways are level. It doesn't make sense yet, but it's a good starting point. What I told you to do next is to draw an approximate limit of disturbance, right? And you don't need to do it for each individual lot. You can combine lots like I did here. This was my limit of disturbance across the new lots that you see in blue. Note, I didn't clear cut the whole lot. I left some woods back there. But I left enough room for a front yard, a backyard. People can get a little pool back there, a retaining wall if they need. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I start with my top of curb polyline. And I use logic, basically, to determine where he's going to grade to. And I know he's going to, when someone buys this lot, they're going to regrade right to this here. They're going to keep this, but they're going to hold the same. So I'm going to draw the polyline from here. And I'm just going to come to the top of the curb, or somewhere close to it. Back to about where I see he's going to like start wanting a backyard. Maybe these guys will have a little bit of backyard. I cannot grade into the riparian buffer. And I cannot grade into my detention basin. I would go through and again do this. This guy can get a nice big backyard. Make sure you don't grade into the wetlands or your wetland buffer, more specifically. And again, I want to leave some woods in the backyard for the neighbors. And this doesn't have to be a perfect polyline because we can always change it when we're done. I'm going to go to the nearest here. And I would trim. There we go. We trim off that top of curb. And we have our general limit of disturbance for the second portion of my grade. Right? You're going to see an issue here. I'm going to wind up getting triangles between the road. That's because it's the proposed surface is going to create a U around that road. You want to avoid it. Divide your surface into two pieces, or you're going to use a boundary, a border on your surface to prevent the triangulation between there. But I'll leave it as one for now so you see the issue. So I've got these polylines. Another tip is your feature line editing commands that I've been telling you about. A lot of them work on polylines, particularly the elevations from surface command up here will work on a polyline. And you can choose your surface. I will insert grade breaks, and I'm going to hit this guy and this guy. That's already a feature line. No, it's not. And it makes a 3D polyline. And I just show you that because that's going to be a little easier on your computer than a feature line, especially with all these vertices that you want so that the surfaces line up perfectly together. So you can work with feature lines, interior, and keep these as 3D polylines. It'll still work fine. So what I'm going to do is make a new surface. And I'm going to call it Res 2 because I already have Res 1. And we'll give it our design style, or proposed style. And that surface now appears in my tool space. And if I expand the definition, we see that we made a surface, but it's an empty surface. There's nothing that we have added to define X, Y, or Z at any point on that surface, right? It's completely empty. So let's start by defining our limit of disturbance. And we take those two 3D polylines and we add them as break lines to that surface definition. All right, you can give them a description if you want. And this is important to note when you have feature lines with curves, because the feature lines are really modeled in a tin as triangles, and it needs to break your curve up into little segments. This value should get smaller with smaller radii and larger with large radii. If I had a 1,000 foot radius, I might set this at 10 or 25 feet. If I had a 100 foot radius, I might set it at 2 to 5 feet. I'm going to be working with radii 5 feet and 12 feet. So I would recommend you guys use a 0.1 mid-ordinate distance when you have curves. I don't have curves here. These are all 3D polylines. This is not important at this one, but when I add the driveways, this becomes important. I hit OK, and lo and behold, if you look at the 3D view, we just made a circle. Now, you note that surface, and I'm going to turn off the other one, is triangulating well outside of our work area, of our limit of disturbance. And that's again because it's coming inside and out of here. And it's also triangulating between the road. What I recommend you do, and it's a lot easier to do it this way, is just divide it into multiple surfaces. And we'll paste them together when we're done, just like you did on your roadway design. I'm going to use the 1 point break, and if I break the limit of disturbance at that polyline I drew, and note I can even do it with that distance there. It's going to interpret it down, and I can connect this, extend. So if I erase this and this lower one, and then run the oops command, and we've talked about this before, it is a command, and it will unerase the last object you put in there. Notice my surface is rebuilt because when I erased those polylines, they were removed from the surface. If I use undo, those break lines go back into the surface. If I use oops, they do not. So now if I rebuild, I got nothing. That's because oh, this one didn't break, that's why. This should have broken. And there it is. Now I have this and this to use as my limit of disturbance. I'll re-add those break lines. And you'll see it's just going to be a little easier to manage. I'm still going to have to do some cleanup, you'll see, around my detention basin. But I don't have to worry about this triangulating all over my road. But I will have to do something to stop it from making contours or triangulating outside of here. And I will do that later either with the border or by deleting triangles. And the border I could make with that 3D polyline, right? This is a polyline. If I want those contours to match with the existing, I assign the elevations from the existing surface. And then I add that break line to the surface. And watch how the contours now just will line up with each other, existing and proposed. I'm showing 2-foot contours on here. 1-foot contours. If I change it to 2, now you see how they're literally hitting every point. So ignore this for now. When I am done grading this, I can take this 3D polyline and join it to this one and this one. Make it a closed 3D polyline. And after it is a break line, you can then add it as a boundary. Make sure it's an outer boundary. And you got to have good geometry. I have a crossing in there somewhere. Somewhere on this polyline overlaps itself. We might be able to fix that by going to layer 0 temporarily, putting it on and making it current. And if I'm lucky, I'll be able to use the boundary command to create a new boundary if I'm lucky. Oh, look at that. Wow. So that is perfect. Erase. I'm going to erase the previous one, but I'm going to hold shift and keep that 2D polyline that I just made. I know it's closed, and I can now add break lines to, or vertices to that, make it a 3D polyline. And now it will work as both break line and boundary. So that's another little CAD trick for you. So I hit OK as a break line. And now I define it as a boundary. I hit OK. And this time we don't get the illegal or self-intersecting polyline. So if I turn my layers back on, we can see now that our surface is limited to that boundary. Now I'm going to tell you, don't add the boundary until the end, because you're going to go through this surface and you're going to continually add more break lines. And if you go into your surface properties, the definitions tab, you see all the information that we've done. We've added break lines. We've added a boundary. If I now come and add more break lines, they're going to go underneath add boundary. And if I add break lines again, they keep going under add boundary. Not only is this a list of the things that's being done, but it's a hierarchy. And these values can be moved up or down. So if you do not want to play with your boundary, I'll get to your hand in a second. If you do not want to play with your boundary for your whole grading exercise, save it for the end. So you don't have to continually move it down to the bottom of the list when you add information to your surface. All right, so so who had their hand raised? Please speak up.
No, we lost the screen again. I think it's because that panorama thing is open. on the left-hand side of your screen. We can only see that.
You can only see the left-hand side because what panorama is open?
No, there's like a little CAD window. It says panorama. That's all we can see.
Yeah, that's because I had surface. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Is that why you had your hand raised?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So how far did I get before 8 o'clock? Oh, only a minute. Good, good. Oh, wait. 2 minutes. Oh, yeah. All right. 2 minutes. Good. Okay, good. Not too much. All right. But where I was, did you see the surface properties dialog? All right. I selected the surface, went into the surface properties. And what I was trying to show you is that every time you add information, it becomes an entry into this list. And this list is also a hierarchy. Things on top are processed first. Things on the bottom are processed last. So for a boundary to be effective, it always needs to be at the bottom of the list. So I was just telling you to save your boundary definition till you're almost done, and you don't have to keep moving it down, so you don't use a lot of time creating that. But you see how effective the boundary was at carving out around my detention basin. So, here we go. We're going to mass grade 3 sites. So I have these rough elevations set. And what I'm going to do is create feature lines from them all. I'm going to select similar. That's my first floor. I had them on a separate layer. And I use feature lines because I'm going to get a new layer and better labels on it. The polylines for your basement and first floor will work fine, but not for your grade line. So I just convert them all. I get a new site temporarily because my site is what creates my layer. I'm going to call this first floor. Finish first floor. Style can be by layer, and I don't want the elevations assigned. And I've got that layer. Oh, wait, that was draw. I had the wrong command. I'm sorry. So here's my polylines again, select it again. What I did was I went create feature line, not create feature line from objects. That's the one I wanted. Oh, now I'm getting that warning again. I don't like, but I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to put them on first floor and see if they hold their position. And they appear to be fine. Now we're going to do the same with the basement floor. Select similar, feature line, create from objects. Hit OK. Ooh, I want a new site called Finish Basement Floor. Again, those sites are also creating new layers for me in my template. I don't know if they will do that in yours. And here you see they went from structure building to feature line. And I should have erased the existing, did I? No. All right, so I'm going to erase the existing polylines too, because I definitely do not need duplicates of these objects. That's just going to confuse me and have more information in my drawing than I really need. Oop, undo because I erased the ones over. Oh, wait. Edit, select similar. I don't want to erase these two yet. Erase. And then select similar. And these are my feature lines, good. And I have only feature lines. Now, we don't see anything because these are all, my basements are actually underneath the surface, or they should have been. Oh, no. Oops. Use it a lot. There they are. They're back. All right. So they just didn't go to the right elevation, but I'm going to keep them anyway. Here's those. Good. And just let me make sure I've got everything I want. 2, good. And polyline, select similar. Erase. Where did those basement floors go though? All right, if you want to know, you can label your, if you want to know where your elevations are, you can label your feature lines and or polylines, or you can use the elevation editor, which shows up in that panorama thing that was blocking your view before. And these are actually at elevation 0. So I converted the wrong feature lines there, the wrong polylines. And I need to move this guy up 379. Same thing with this guy. Edit. Ooh, I can do them all together. I can select, if I have feature lines selected and I right click, I get a couple of special commands. They will only be there if you have only feature lines selected. Raise lower is a really good one to use because I'm going to go 370. 9, that wasn't the right elevation. I wanted it to be 8 feet lower than that. So I'm going to use my change previous, and I am going to lower that. I'm going to repeat that command. And I'm going to lower them now minus 8 feet. And that puts my 2 basements back where they should have been that I just messed up. Oh. I didn't raise and lower them yet. And now they're in position. All right, so you have feature lines for your first floor, basement floor. We now need a feature line for our buildings. And I'll do these 2 right now. I don't know if I fixed this other. I'll do 3 of them. And we want feature lines instead of polylines because they react together when they're on the same site. And that means when you change the elevation of one, the other one will follow. So this is going to be grade line. I'm going to call it BLD. And then I'll give that its own. And then I'm going to do the same with the driveways that are polylines and make them feature lines as well. I'm not ready to do this side. Feature lines create from objects. And this is going to go to driveway, a new site by layer, and they have the elevations I want. All right, so that made some wonderful layers for me. I don't think you guys will have this, but if I go feature line, I can now get control of all this stuff. This is color 4. This is color 1. And these guys can be color 8, make them gray so they stand in the back. All right. So that got me pretty much set. I'm also going to change the color of my proposed contours here because I want them a little subdued. I'm not designing contours. I don't want them taking up my entire view. I want to focus on the buildings, the driveways, and the walls that I'm creating and that I'm building and constructing, or would be. All right, so we're given these feature lines. Ooh, look at that. I don't quite line up there, do I? Right? Can you see that? Those feature lines don't hit the surface. They need to. I'll see that error when I make the break lines, when I make this stuff. But let's take basement floor and grade line. Do not add the first floor to your surface. Take the basement and the grade line, the middle and the outer, and add them to your surface. Res 2. And what happens? Look at that. We just dug the holes. Ooh. I want that basement. All right. Just get me an elevator. I'll have fun with that. Wrong elevation, right? Not a big deal. I come down here and get that basement feature line, which is in here. That's my surface. I'm going to send that display to the back. Here's my feature line. That's still at elevation 0. And this was up at 380 for the first floor, I think. So I'm going to have to raise this 372. Look at that. This is some of the beauty of Civil 3D is this dynamic relationship. So we have all of these buildings and all of these driveways. Right now they are on different sites and they will not react with each other. If I raise or lower that grade line, cyan line, the driveways do not follow. And I'll show you that. Let's take this and let's raise lower -2. And you see the red line didn't follow. I'm going to repeat and I'm going to go raise lower previous object, bring it back up to where it was. And I want to show you this. For the importance of the sites. I said 0.05 units for that offset. Someone asked that question before. It's 0.05 units between all the floors. And that's just so we can approximate the vertical edge. The tin cannot have a vertical edge. So if I take all of these and all of these, I can't do them together. I need to do them separate. So take all of my grade line feature lines and now move them to a common site. And I do my driveways separately because they're different sites, and this command right here does not move unless everything you have selected is in the same site. Now that all these feature lines are in the same site, the grade lines and the driveways, Note what happens now if I raise this 2 feet. The red line follows. Let me do that a little better, that demonstration, because you don't see it correctly yet. And I'm just undoing until I get to that raise lower again. Or let me just raise lower it again 2 feet. I'm going to add these driveway brake lines to the surface first. Then you'll see that demonstration a little bit better. This is again, I know your screen went blank, my Res 2 surface, hit OK. And again, I have curves on my driveway. I want to keep that mid-ordinate distance low. Right, now you see how the surface is forming around there. And now if I took, and actually, I'm just going to raise my whole building up. And this is where you want to raise all 3 of these together, right? Let's say that 379 was too low, and it might be too low because I really only have one contour back here. But I don't know. I'm going to try raising the whole building up 2 feet. And it comes up, and you see my brake line follows. That's because they are in the same site. So when you're using these feature lines, you can, depending on your style, you can give them different styles, but make sure they're in the same site when you begin grading so that they are reacting together. All right, so we've got some issues here. This looks pretty good. A couple of, 3 or 4 feet drop from across the front of the house. My driveway is not level. I probably don't have a great grade going across here. So I want to fix this up a little bit. And quite honestly, if I put some contour labels on this, this looks like this might be really good for a walkout basement. All right, I've got dropping terrain, and I want to get a flatter backyard for this area. And it looks like I probably get away with it on the next one too, even the other one. Looks like I'm going to need walkout basements on most of these. All right, and I don't want to lower the building below the road because then I'm going to need sump pumps. So I'm going to try the best I can to keep all these first floors a minimum of 2 feet above the road, just so I can get a gravity sewer connection out there, and I don't need sewage pumps in each house. All right, let's look at this for a walkout basement. The walkout basement says I want people to walk in here and come in the first floor. They'll be able to go downstairs into the basement and then be able to walk out the basement. So I'm going to need a bit of a retaining wall. And with this design, it's pretty easy to get a retaining wall right outside here. I'm going to take this driveway and I'm going to just assume the wall is connected to that driveway. And I'm going to offset that feature line with the stepped offset. I told you guys you can use a 1 foot width to help with your grading. It's not realistic unless you're putting up a formed concrete wall. But for now, just use a 1 foot width for your wall in plan view. And I make a top of wall break line there. Now, what did I do here? I made an intersection of 2 feature lines. And at every intersection, I want a PI if I want to be able to control that elevation from either object. All right, so we note in 3D view that my grades are changing a little bit here around the grade line. And that's all right, I want it to change a little bit. But I'm going to use my set grade up here. Set grade slope between points. We've gone through that command before. And I'm going to start on that grade line over here. I'm going to say start at that 381 that we were at and come to the top of the wall. And what's my maximum allowed grade? Is I'm allowed 3 on 1. So I can come down at a slope of -3. And I can check now. Actually, I probably don't want to do it that way. I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to come across at 0 for now. A grade of 0. It brings that back up, and I'm going to put in, what's my maximum height of wall? 4 feet, right? I'm going to use a difference there, a grade difference of -4. Let's see what that looks like, and level this to here. Oh, I didn't want to, I wanted to go at grade 0. Grade 0. There we are. And now we're looking at this grade here, and let's come across at 0 again. And we see how we just are beginning to make our elevation, but my driveway is a little bit above. I've got my 4 feet there. I really want to shift that driveway down a bit. So what elevation do I want? Let's see if that works. Working it up from the other way. And what I'm doing here is my grading, as you see, is an iterative process. I need to try a scenario, see how it's working, and then continue from there. So I'm at 373. Let's try putting that driveway at elevation 373. Come across my driveway at a grade of 0. And lift my wall 4 feet. And I hope you're paying attention to the command line. That's where I'm going and changing between grade and elevation difference. Right now I got to get to a difference of 4. And now I'm just going to check my slope up through here. Look at that, the grade is 21. If you remember, I told you the maximum grade you're allowed is 1 on 3 rise over run, which turns out to be 33.33%. So my grade line works. This is less than the maximum slope. I've got my 0 down here. I got to level out this. I'm down at 373. I want that back floor to come down to a 0 grade. And then I'm going to have that 8-foot difference made up along the edge. All right, so look at that. I've got a flatter backyard. That looks pretty good. I've got a nice front yard. Does my driveway look good? No, not unless I'm creating a weir and I want water flooding my driveway, and I just want to, like, you know, throw my car into my garage. So I've got to regrade my driveway now. Look at this. This is not either on the same site or I did not hit that elevation correct. Let's see. Right click, move to site. And I know it's not, look at that, it's still on the driveway site. And I know it wasn't on the same site because there's cannot be 2 different Z's at any point, 2 different Z values. So I move this to here, and look at that. The feature line automatically finds the elevation. All right, so I'm working through that. Let's look at my driveway. You remember I told you guys this is our parking area in here. We can fit 2 stalls. We have a 2-car garage. You actually wind up with 4 parking stalls on each residential lot. But again, up here, my feature line editing, set grade slope is one of my favorite commands. I use it a lot. And I start here, and I come down to the bottom here, and I said your maximum parking area can be 5%. And you generally want that away from the house. I'm going to start here with something a little more normal. I'm just going to go down -2%. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the other side of the driveway, but I'm only going to come to that curve, the end of the curve. Ooh, I didn't get the 2% on that. Let me do that again. Grade -2, good. Down over here. Grade is -2. And I'm going to do the same for the top of the wall so I maintain that uniform 4 foot. Grade is -2. Let's hit return and see how the surface updates. Ah, look at that. Makes a little more sense, at least for the driveway. But if you notice, my wall, the top of wall is not in that surface. Let's add that. Press 2, that's the right surface. I hit OK. Now we see my top of wall going in there. All right, so I still have a few more issues. Number 1, I do want to level my driveway over here. And number 2, I'm not hitting existing grade. All right. So watch in 3D as I take this line in 2D and I take the grip and I snap it to the end point. And if you see in 3D, it goes down. This is important. If you do not see this happening, you need to install the latest update to Civil 3D. If that elevation does not change when you grip edit, you have a bug, and the latest update to Civil 3D will fix it. I'm going to do the same to the other side. Just going to grip edit it right on top of itself to the endpoint. It should come right down to elevation. Now, another thing I told you about when we talked about retaining walls, and we did talk about this last time. I'll put on my other surface and show you. We noted that retaining walls cannot really end abruptly. Can't just terminate that retaining wall with a 4-foot height like we have here. Right here we see the 4-foot height. And over here you see how that height tapers down to a 0 change in elevation. The same thing should show on the other side. Right? So over here, again, I can't have that terminate. So what I'm going to do is put in a 1-point break on the end point of that. And I'm just going to grip edit that feature line back down. And now we see my wall will taper down to 0 as well. One last thing to fix up, and that is you notice that when or 2 things to fix up. When I broke that 3D polyline, the border on my surface broke. And B, I lost all that surface definition. So I can go back to my surface and re-add this as a break line. But I'll show you another super secret trick. Is if you notice, this break line stayed in the surface. Here. Or it appears to. No, it did not. One of them should have stayed in. If I joined them, it would then put them back in. But regardless, your feature line join command will join them back up. And you can just put that back into the surface. And as I said, it's not going to be defined as I'd have to redefine the boundary. And again, I'm just going to wait for that because I don't want to mess with that a lot. Look in the 3D view, we're back to where we were. All right, so the last thing I want to fix is that my driveway is not really level. And we can see that because my contour should be going straight across if it was level. I want to maintain my cross slope away from the building here, but I have enough slope here to send water to the driveway, and I'll have enough slope either up or down to get the water off to that corner and away from the building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a feature line. And I'm going to put this on that res site so that it reacts with all of these. I'm going to draw it from the end point of that curve return. It's going to get the wrong elevation. Notice coming from an elevation of 0, which means I have a polyline under there. But I'm going to go surface and get it from res 2. It finds a better elevation. And I'm going to push this guy perpendicular. It's going to ask me for a grade. I'm going to say -2. It may work, it may not. I hit return, and it's not quite working. Again, like I said, we have crossing feature lines. Insert a PI, and now you'll see that changing. All right, so let's look at our contour. Ooh, much better, right? Still flowing a little bit off that way, that's fine. Actually, it's flowing out that way, which is even better, because we would be collecting the stormwater runoff from this house somewhere in the back here, and we can swale that water away, but it's running away from the building, and that is your primary concern here. You can shorten this driveway down if you want. I can draw a polyline anywhere along, starting at the bottom, go perpendicular, and that polyline has a constant elevation. So if I just grip at it, this top of wall to that polyline, we can see how we reduce that wall length. And I told you, check your contours. If you're closer than 6 feet horizontally, then you're greater than that 1-on-3. I've got 8 feet there. I'm not. I also told you that if you read my handout, there's a number of ways to create slope surfaces that will show you when you exceed the values you want. And I'm going to give a style that shows the slopes. I made a new surface. And if I just paste in both the res 1 and the res 2, I see the slopes of that surface, of both of those surfaces. If you go to the surface properties, and this again, this is all in that handout I gave you. So you should be able to do this on your own with the step-by-step instructions in that handout. You go to the surface properties, not the style. You can perform an analysis, and you can do a slope analysis. And I said there were a few critical slopes here. I wanted to know everything that was less than 1%, because that would be bad pavement slopes. You want to see everything less than 2%, because that would be bad lawn slopes. And I want to see everything at less than 5% for my parking. And I want to see everything greater than 1 on 3. So what was that, 4 ranges? I can put in 4 ranges. Okay, and I can say, all right, the first one, we're only going to go to 1%. And if I have anything less than that, it's going to show red. Then we're going to go from 1 to 2%. And if we have any of that, we're going to show it as, maybe a light red. And then this is going to show us now from 2 to 5, right? This would be acceptable parking. And let's make that green or blue. We'll see if we go over. And then I can show over here everything in real dark red anytime I go over 33.33%. I hit apply. I've got a scheme. So everything less than 1% is in red. And if you notice, all my basement floors are red, and that's good. I expect it. I have flat basement floors. So that doesn't shock me. There's no error there. But I have some red over here. That would be something to worry about if that was within my limit of disturbance. When I fix up my border and put that on later, that will go away. I've got some areas right here that are much greater than 1 on 3. But right away, I can see that my driveway is too steep. Oh, no, it's in that, it's within, it's not too steep. It is within that 2 and 5%. And it doesn't exceed that 5%, which is good. But I've got some issues over here. And I can send this surface to the back. Display order, send to back, so I can see my contours through there. But you can see I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. This is not going to work. I am more than likely going to need a walkout basement here and a retaining wall or 2 to make this work. Probably put a retaining wall along here somewhere. But that's how you can set up and analyze your slopes. You could do this in your actual surface too, but I generally do it on its own surface so I can put it on its own layer and I can check. All right, so that was a lot. I've now gone through grading of 3 lots with you guys. We can do this again next week. But I hope you guys are seeing how all these feature line tools are giving you the same power to edit these elevations and geometry that you did when you did your roadway grading. And B, how we can make these this grading scenario work. Now, I told you there are stupid, crazy things you can do, and I'm only going to do this so you see what we're building, and I don't recommend you do this, but I could always add this to a surface, call it BLD1. You would make 1 for each surface, for each building. And I have a style here that hides it in 2D and then shows the triangles in 3D. And that means that I can see it in 3D and not see it in 2D. And what it allows me to do is at least see the foundation walls that I'm putting in. All right, it doesn't have the first floor, but But that would be the building pad. And yeah, it should be hollowed out, but I don't care too much about detailing. Remember what I told you about over detailing your model. But now you see how this lot is starting to grade. And it looks pretty reasonable. I could later on take these contours, and we'll get to that next week, draw polylines over them to smooth them out a bit. But before I do that, I want to move on to my next lot's grading. And I want to see how these contours between the two buildings will react before I start putting in swales or retaining walls that I might need to make this work. So I would rough grade in buildings, driveways, all the way down, and this surface is going to here. You can then do another surface and do the buildings and driveways in these three lots. And I can finish up the buildings and driveways here. And then I would go around and look at other specific detailing I could do. But once I got these in, I would better see where I would needed walls, especially once I adjusted this and this for a walkout basement, right? Any questions? I know we're running a little late, and I know you guys are probably sick of video classes at this point. How many people love video conferencing for classwork? In your chat, go ahead. All right, hearing none. All right, I hope I made you chuckle a little bit. I hope you guys understood what I was doing. I hope you guys are following along. Again, we went through this a number of times, the residential grading. It is pretty difficult. We do have another week or two to work on that. But please try to get caught up. If you are honestly caught up next week, where, like I said, you just need to tweak utility designs, and you're working on your residential grading. You have your sheets begun, but maybe not perfect. You're in good shape. You still have a few weeks to get that done. But if you're still just doing your roadway grading and your basin grading right now and getting your earthworks, you're not in very good shape. If you haven't begun your utility layouts, you're in really bad shape. So I hope you guys are keeping up. The proof will be in the pudding. We'll see who was caught up at the end, and you don't have to show me. It's going to be obvious. Like I said, your checklist, don't forget, is right here. Right? There's a few things we added, but here, and I even think this too, right? This was important, right? Now just remember, topographic features in this case means not just contours, but also buildings and driveways and stuff like that. But in your subdivision plan, you should have no elevation data. Remember that from submission 1. That's an exception to this rule. All right, if we don't have any further questions, and I'll give you a little time to respond. Again, the chat is open. I'm going to tell you all to go in peace. Have a good week. Stay safe. Practice your social distancing. Wash your hands. Do everything you can to keep you and your loved ones safe. Not just the elderly, if you're keeping up on this. You see that men ages almost 20 to 40 are highly affected in New York City, so you guys be safe as well. Do what you can to keep those around you. Go in peace. Have a good week. We will meet here next week, same bat time, same bat channel, for all you Marvel fans. Take care.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.